That's right. Welcome in. Welcome back, folks, to a Notre Dame recruiting update, the chicken or the egg edition of the Always Irish Show. As always, you can find the program on YouTube. Do hit subscribe if you haven't yet. I'd appreciate that very much. As well as you giving the video a thumbs up, I'd also appreciate that. Twitter, search bar Always Irish or at Always Irish Inc. Emails, alwaysirishnd@gmail.com. Audio only, anywhere you want me, you can get me. Call-in show, Always Irish Radio, 312-900-8815. The topic of the day, what we have to discuss, to me, is the number one determining factor of if Marcus Freeman can succeed at Notre Dame at a higher ceiling level than Brian Kelly ever did. It is the most important part, number one. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care what anybody else writes. I don't care what anybody else podcasts. This is the number one determining factor of if Freeman's going to be able to get over the hump that we all begged for, lived and died for, and couldn't get over with the swamp man himself. Now, this is a tricky discussion in some ways, and in others, it's very, very straightforward and easy to understand and comprehend and talk about. Here's where we're going to start. Of the 2023 class, Saban has offered scholarships to all but one of the position players that we have committed in the fold so far. That could never be said about Brian Kelly Notre Dame classes. That's just not a debate. You could never say that dynamic existed when Brian Kelly was here. That we were swimming in the deep end of talent so much that Nick Saban himself wants not one or two of our guys. Got Saban offers almost all. Almost all. That is absolutely fantastic news. That is beautiful. That is wonderful. We are starting to swim in the deep end of the talent pool, which is the one you got to swim in to win a championship. Now, swimming in the pool where all the top teams are, going after the same guys they are, can be a double-edged sword. You land enough of them, you win big. By win big, I mean winning playoff games, not the Camping World Bowl. So whenever I talk about winning big, it's playoff games, nothing else. That's the bar at Notre Dame of what winning big needs to be now. We've done everything else. Been there, done that. Every other way. Winning playoff games is the only other bar to clear. Now, the downside to this recruiting approach, which is the necessary and appropriate one, the only one you could operate in and win, the downside of this is you might lose some verbal commitments to Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State. People are very concerned. We may lose a guy like Keeley due to this exact dynamic. It's a valid concern. But I ask you, what's the alternative to this? Targeting and recruiting worse players that the top teams don't want? That's a losing equation if you want to be a playoff and title contender. Okay? What good does it do you to have no competition, of no risk of a guy stealing one of your recruits? That tells me he's not that great of a player. So it's a really bad argument because the only solution to the problem is recruiting not as good guys. That's never going to win you a championship. We've been there, done that with pretty good classes, trying to coach them up, develop them up, all of that. Talent wins. Elite talent wins. You got to swim in this pool. You got to swim in this pool. So it's a losing equation if you're targeting guys that the best teams don't want. That's a red flag of your recruiting operation. The flip side is competing against the top elite teams that have proven it and trying to beat them for some of these recruits. You might lose some. You might lose some. So then the question becomes, here's where this discussion gets really interesting to me, really existential, really philosophical. This is fascinating to me. What comes first? Winning big. My definition of big is a playoff game and beating teams you're not supposed to beat, whether that's regular season and applying to the playoff. Winning big to me means, no, we're not just going to chalk in a loss week 1 at Ohio State because they're Ohio State and we have a new coach and a new quarterback and all this, whatever. Winning big means win that game. Change the narrative right away. Right? So, what comes first? Winning big to land a boatload of elite guys? Or do you land the elite players, then with them you win big? Chicken or the egg problem. If you beat teams nobody expects you to beat, it's easier to land elite players. At the same time, if you land elite players, it's going to be easier to win your big games, and then that breeds landing more elite players. So, philosophically, how can this go for Marcus Freeman? What are the options? I see 4 pathways here. Number 1, win your big games, and the elites will be interested. Beat Ohio State week 1, you open the floodgates. That would change everything right away. Number 2, don't win your biggest games like Ohio State yet, for whatever reason you want to say, young quarterback, new coach, whatever. Don't win your biggest games yet, but overcome that with relentless work ethic on the recruiting trail, Marcus Freeman's personality, and have kids buy into this mission even before there's any skins on the wall, trophies in the case. That's an option. I don't think this was an option under Brian Kelly because he didn't have the drive or will to do this enough in recruiting. He didn't have his naturally charismatic, disarming, welcoming personality that Marcus Freeman does. Wasn't able to relate to these younger guys in the same way. So that's the second option. Option 1 is win your big games. Elite guys are going to be interested that weren't before. Number 2, you're not quite ready to get over that hump and beat a team like Ohio State week 1, but with a relentless work ethic and Marcus's personality, have kids buying in anyways. That's option 2. And that was an option not available with Brian Kelly because that's just not his recruiting DNA. Number 3, do both. This is the holy grail of college football, where everybody wants to be. You're winning your big games and recruiting elitely. Those two things go hand in hand and just help breed each other to be further along when you get to that point. You win your big games, elite guys want to play there. Elite guys are playing there, you're winning your big games. And you ride that wave back and forth together in unison as much as you can. That's the window Alabama's in. You could say Georgia's only got this one title, but they're recruiting at a level where that's a position they could be in. Ohio State's very similar in that regard. So this, number 3, is the holy grail, best option of the bunch. Start winning games that make people open their eyes and go, whoa, I didn't know Notre Dame had it like that. and you're going to catch the attention of these guys. You add that in with Marcus's already dynamic personality, off to the races. Beautiful. Here's number 4 option. Doing neither. Doing neither. So I will call this the Brian Kelly plan. Don't win your biggest games with enough regularity that it catches recruits' attention. I'm not saying Brian Kelly didn't have any big wins, but how often could you say we went in playing a great team as an underdog, both teams at relative health strength, and we won? How many times? Not enough that you could live off of in recruiting with any kind of consistency or regularity. So to me, Brian Kelly did neither. Didn't win his biggest games with regularity to open up guys' eyes, and he wasn't putting in the effort or wasn't naturally dynamic enough as a recruiter to be able to overcome not winning all your big games or some of your big games to still land the elite talent. Brian Kelly was on the neither plan here. He didn't check either of these boxes. That's where Brian Kelly ended. And while that's unfortunate and frustrating in retrospect, there's actually some really encouraging, great news from this Brian Kelly specific dynamic. Brian Kelly was able to make Notre Dame really, really good. A perennial top 10 team the last handful of years, while losing most of his games where we were even mild underdogs, most definitely all the playoff games, and without recruiting top 5 talent in aggregate. That's the most encouraging part of this entire discussion. Brian Kelly got us knocking at the door of elite without doing either of these things that I think are absolutely critical to getting over the hump. Opening people's eyes by knocking off teams that are better than you. And working your ass off in recruiting every single day to get these elite guys. Kelly didn't do either and still had Notre Dame with multiple undefeated seasons banging at the door of elite. He just could never figure out the right code to get in that door. So that is the most encouraging part of this. Kelly got us so close without doing these things. And I think Marcus has a chance to eventually be able to do both. At a minimum, I know he's going to use that personality and land us some guys. If he can mix in some big wins, this thing's going to go off to the races very, very quickly. This is a new age of Notre Dame recruiting, a recalibration, a prioritization focused on recruiting. You're already seeing it. You're already seeing it. Now, I get it. So far, we have our eyes on these big offensive prizes in the next couple cycles, 23, 24. A lot of smoke, a lot of talk, a lot of rumors. Nothing's done yet, though, with some of the biggest names we're eyeing at wide receiver, quarterback, all of that. So we don't know how that's going to go yet. You're going to win some battles. You're going to lose some battles. But going down this path of targeting these top-end guys is your only path to a title at Notre Dame. So you need to find a way to navigate this. It's the chicken and the egg scenario. Do you got to win enough games to open enough eyes with what you have to get the elite guys? Or do we need to get the elite guys and then win and it keeps breeding this cycle? I don't know. But I just feel like Marcus Freeman is a dynamic enough personality that there's more avenues to get us to where we want to go than there was with Brian Kelly, the way he operated and was always going to operate and wasn't going to change. So eventually, You want to see this get into number 3 where we're doing both. Winning some games we're not supposed to win that open some eyes, and have Marcus have these younger guys built into the idea that this really is going to be different and to come on board and be a part of that first group of talent that does win these games we're not supposed to win. I think there's a huge opportunity here, but I cannot state enough how great it is that Brian Kelly didn't do either of the most important things I'm talking about and add us this close to breaking into elite multiple times. That tells me we're close. We're close. It needs to be navigated properly here, but we are close. That is so encouraging. So encouraging. So, chicken or the egg, a little bit of both would be great right now. Little bit of both, okay? But this staff approaches recruiting relentlessly. And I don't know how long it's going to take for that to show on the field, but I know that it's going to eventually. And you're going to notice it is looking different when you see it. That's coming. So this is all encouraging, but it's an interesting dynamic. How we're swimming in the deep end. All these proven elite coaches and programs want our guys. How do we keep them and not let them get sucked away and go down south? Whatever. It's super interesting, this new dynamic. But pay attention. Pay attention. When you got Nick Saban wanting the guys we want, you're swimming in the right pool. That's the right pond. That's the right lake to fish in. Okay? So, find a way to win your games and use that personality and let them both work for you at the same time. That's where we need to get. That's where Marcus is going to get. It's just a matter of how long it takes to get there. Have a good one.